Thank you, Perry. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking the time out this evening. Tonight we're going to do a brief, quick Aspen system overview to kind of refresh everyone's memory what we have available. We're going to go over some cool features that you may or may not know about already about the Aspen systems. We'll go over a few tips as well. The cool features and the tips are stuff we've gleaned from the past few shows or common questions we get. We'll talk about some current promotions towards the end. And as Perry mentioned, we'll be doing Q&A throughout. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, type them in the Q&A. Once we get done, Dave Wilcox will be answering those questions during the seminar. And once we get done, we'll pull some of the most commonly asked questions or any questions that Dave didn't get to yet. However, before I get started, I want to go back to this opening screen here. This screen, this cockpit really encapsulate what Aspen Avionics is all about. And I'm not talking about this cool 2500 Max system on this panel. No, I'm talking about the center stack. So take a look at the center stack here. This is really important. If you learn nothing else tonight, this is really important. This top unit right here is an NGT 9000 ADS-B transponder. However, it could be a GTX 345 transponder. It could be a Avionics Skytrax transponder. It could be an older analog transponder with a GDL88 or a free flight Ranger box pushing ADS-B traffic on their displays. It doesn't matter. It's going to work with the Aspen display. Below that is a really nice PSE engineering. I think this is a PMA 450 audio panel. Really, really nice audio system. This aircraft had a Garmin audio panel before. Once again, really doesn't matter to us what audio panel you have. We're going to work really hard to make sure it integrates with the new cool audio features of the Max system. Below that is a pair of GTN 650s. This aircraft started its life with 430s, was upgraded to 430Ws. I was actually going to put IFD 440s in here, but I got such a sweet deal from an operator who did not like the touchscreens. So he wanted 430W, so really good trade. But the point is, whether you have 430, 530, 430W, 530W, GTN 650, GTN 750, Avionics IFD 440, 540, 550, a KSN, or any of the other older analog GPS systems, they're going to work perfectly well with the Aspen displays. And below that, right out of view, is the awesome Avionics DFC-90 autopilot. This aircraft started its life with a STEC 55X. Then again, STEC 30 all the way to 3100. All the King autopilots, Century autopilots, Cessna autopilots, even the newer Garmin GFC 600 autopilot, all work with the Aspen display. So the big thing to think about when you're doing an upgrade to your panel is integration. Aspen, as a display manufacturer, we work really hard to make sure we integrate with everyone else's equipment. Okay, so let's get into it. So first system we're going to talk about, of course, is the Evolution Pro Max PFD. The legacy system has been around since about 2009, 2010. It's been around for a long time. And what we've been doing with the legacy system is upgrading software. The Pro Max is the first integration of new hardware, big hardware update for our display system. So it's got a new screen. It's got a really nice anti-glare screen now. It's got a new graphics card. For reference, the original graphic card had 16 colors. The new one has over 16 million color combinations. So stuff like synthetic vision here, and you're on the nav map as in the MFD, all are much nicer displays. The processor now is 4 times as fast. The AHRS and ADC sensors are thinner and run much cooler. So this really is more processing power for Aspen to go forward with more features and more options as we go along. As I mentioned, the visual feature enhancements it's incredible. If you ever come to a show, we've got this awesome demo. We've got a legacy display running side by side to a Max. The legacy displays are nice displays, but when you look at it next to a Max, you'll just be blown away how much better the Pro Max is. These systems are plug and play. So if you have a legacy display and you want to upgrade to Pro Max, we use the same harness, same connector. The only difference is, since the Maxes have audio, there is one wire your shop will have to run from the existing Aspen connector to the audio panel, but that's it. anything you've purchased before, like angle of attack, ADS-B, synthetic vision, all those features just transfer over. You don't have to purchase anything again. Maxes are compatible with both the STEC 3100 and the GFC 600 autopods as well. There is brand new backup battery technology for increased capacity and what we call dual-aided ARs. These two combined now allow an Aspen installation without a backup attitude indicator. So pretty nice features. Next big system we're going to talk about, the 2000 2500 Max systems. This is basically a PFD Pro 1000 paired with an MFD 1000 and an MFD 500. The 2000 system now, because the dual-aided ARs and the new battery, the MFD 1000 is a complete legal backup to the Pro Max PFD. So those two displays or three displays are all you need on the panel. Your entire six-pack goes away at this point. Really nice way to clean up your panel. The Evolution E5 electronic flight instrument. This is our base model, if you will. Once again, this shares the same hardware as the Pro Max. We actually introduced all the new hardware on the E5 first, and then translated that to the Pro Max a year later. Just like the Pro Max, when you install an E5, you do not need a backup attitude indicator. It is fully IFR certified as long as you pair with an IFR GPS, so we can do ILSs and LPV approaches all day long. It's compatible with all the legacy avionics in your panel now. If you have a King or Sentry autopilot, you will need some optional equipment, the ACU and the EA100, to drive those autopilots. With the release of our latest software 212, we now have AirLink outputs for selected altitude and indicated airspeed for Trio and Benix Aerocruise autopods with the E5 as well. The really cool thing about the E5 is since it shares the same hardware as the Pro Max, this is completely upgradable just via software from an E5 to a Pro Max. So if you purchase an E5 and decide, oh, I want all these other cool features, we basically charge you the price difference between the two and make that a Pro Max. So what are the features you're not getting with the E5? Well, the E5 cannot have synthetic vision. The E5 cannot display ADS-B traffic or weather. The E5 cannot have angle of attack. The E5 can only talk to one GPS and can only have one GPS and one BLOC input. So if you have a pair of GPS systems, you're kind of wasting your time with an E5 because it's only going to be able to talk to one of them. The E5 doesn't have any bearing pointers, which I'll talk about more in a later slide as well. This particular slide in the E5 is shown with the optional advanced feature unlock. For $500, what you get with the E5 additionally is you get true airspeed, the outside air temperature, your winds aloft, and your GPS loss annunciations. Now, if you're buying an E5 now for the lower price point, but fully intend to upgrade to a Pro Max later, don't buy the. I know the sales guys are going to beat me up for this, but don't buy the advanced feature unlock because that's a standard feature of the Pro Max. So if you know you're going to do it, it's inevitable. Then just wait to get those features later. It is, by the way, the 5-year anniversary. I can't believe it's been 5 years since we released the E5, but we'll talk more about that in a minute as well. Okay, on to some cool features. So the emergency RSM GPS, this has been a feature of the Aspen since the beginning. What this does, it automatically activates when our system detects a loss of GPS input. So you see here on these all three displays, you have GPS 1 and 2 in amber bubbles here. That's telling you lost GPS input. Either it's a failure of the electrical system or a failure of the GPS units themselves. So once the Aspen recognizes that, we go into what's called emergency GPS reversion. So you see that annunciation up here, emergency use only, on all three displays. And what's happening is the Aspen is going to remember all the waypoints that were part of the flight plan in the GPS system before it failed, and to maintain those on the displays. If you notice on the PFD here, the deviation bar is removed. The deviation bar on HSI is removed because it's not going to be the same scale. The emergency GPS is not the same scale or tolerance as a panel mounted GPS. However, your flight plan is still there, so you can still fly in the general direction and maintain, so your IMC, maintain your route of flight, This is really designed to buy you time to get to VMC conditions. Pull out your backup radio, tell ATC what's going on, and get guidance to VMC. The big thing in this mode is you cannot change these waypoints. There's no way to alter the waypoints. There's certainly no way to shoot an approach because your deviation indications are removed. The idea, buy time to get to VMC conditions. If you've never done it before, the next time you fly with a CFI, load a flight plan in and then turn off the GPS system and practice flying like this. It's better to practice now than to have it first time in an emergency situation. So you can easily do this. You can easily practice this just by loading a flight plan, activating it once you're in flight, and turning it off and see how well you can navigate along the flight plan. Okay, the next cool feature, this has also been around for quite a while, synthetic vision flight path marker. This was introduced a long time ago with the legacy systems. The neat thing is that when you upgrade to synthetic vision, you get 3 new PFD views. You get a full screen synthetic vision view, which is SV1. My personal favorite, SV2, is synthetic vision on the on the attitude indicator, and the blacked out HSI in the bottom. And then for single display customers, SV3 is probably the best because you've got the synthetic vision on the attitude indicator, but on your HSI, you've got a really nice terrain map, and your flight plan is going to be down there as well. Really, really handy. Synthetic vision is really designed as an IFR, marginal VFR, or night VFR obstacle and terrain avoidance. If you're a day VMC, you're going to see all this stuff. So your vision's not hampered at all. So you're going to see the stuff. However, even in day VMC, if there's a traffic conflict, that traffic will show up either above or below the horizon, and you can really help you actually pick out that traffic a lot easier once you see where he's at on the synthetic vision. So it's still a good use for day VFR, but ideally think low visibility. When I was stationed in Miramar, we used to fly to Camp Pendleton a lot for missions and come back to Miramar. We always dealt with that marine layer. And the helicopters, we had forward-looking infrared, so if we were getting vectored around, we always knew where the terrain was and could see stuff. General aviation, we don't have that luxury. FLIR systems are pretty expensive, so synthetic vision is really the next best thing to help you avoid obstacles. Typically, the flight path marker. This is another important feature. I see a lot of pilots. You can turn this on or off in the menu. And I'm not sure why people like to turn this off. The flight path marker is a really, really important tool because when you're flying, whether you're on approach or a cruise, you're always combining winds. So you're crabbed into a wind and your nose is not pointing the direction you're going. The flight path marker will always be pointed in the direction the aircraft is flying, which is critical for avoiding obstacles and terrain. The flight path marker is normally green during normal cruise. When you get within 45 seconds of terrain or an obstacle, it's going to turn amber like it is here. And then you get caution, obstacle, or caution, terrain. And it's going to give you that warning about 45 seconds ahead of time. If you ignore that warning and keep going 30 seconds prior to impact, you're going to get warning, terrain, warning, obstacle. So the goal is you get this message, make a turn, do something to get yourself out of the situation. As I mentioned, using the flight path marker, especially on the approach, so you're coming in an approach, you're crabbed into the wind, and your crosshairs are lined up perfectly. Well, your flight path marker is going to be right on the runway, so it's a really, really nice situational awareness builder as well. Synthetic vision also has 2 different views as far as narrow and wide field of view. If you notice here, you only see the 5-degree pitch marks here and this little narrow fan here. This is the narrow field of view. And when you see 10s and 20s and the wide fan, that's your wide field of view. I typically prefer the wide field of view, unless, back to that Miramar or marine layer type of thing, you're flying in Southern California. The marine layer is pretty smooth, at least it was in my experience. So the narrow field of view kind of gives you a much enclosed picture of what's going on outside. Plus, when you're coming into the runway on ILS or something like that, that flight path marker, that runway is going to blow off really nice. But if you're flying in turbulent conditions, typically everywhere else, the wide field of view is a much better one. But really, try them out. If you haven't noticed this before, which it shows a lot of customers haven't, try them out. You can go into the narrow and wide field view on the SV page, that SV menu. Next cool features have been around for quite a while, since the beginning of the Aspen, is a ground track marker. And it is amazing how many pilots that have never realized what this is before. But this right here, if you see this little blue diamond right here above the 3, below the heading marker, that's the ground track marker, and that is your actual path over the ground. This is really a really great tool to help compensate for winds. So when you're flying along and you're trying to get on course, of course you're using your deviation indicator as well. But you'll see the flight path and the ground path marker off, and you're pulling to think about it is pull the flight path marker toward your intended course. If you're flying with an MFD as well, in nav map, there's going to be a dash cyan line projected off the nose of the aircraft. So that dash line on the MFD and this diamond both represent your ground track. So they're really great tools to have for wind correction. If you haven't used it before, I really recommend, once again, with your CFI next time you're out shooting approaches, practice using that ground track marker, see how it works, and purposely fly yourself on it, purposely fly yourself off course and get yourself, just off course a little bit to see how that flight path marker or what that ground path marker is doing and see how it works. And so in the future, you'll be able to incorporate that in your scan a lot quicker. Next cool feature that was introduced several years ago is angle of attack. This is an optional feature introduced on the legacy displays. Once again, if you have a legacy system and you've purchased angle of attack and you upgrade to a Max, that's going to transfer over everything, so you don't have to redo, you don't have to repurchase or recalibrate or anything at all. A little history on this. So back in 2018, the FAA did a study of 2017 accident data, and they found there was a loss of control fatality every 4 days for general aviation. That's huge. It's really significant when you think about it. Every 4 days, there's a loss of control fatality. So they made several recommendations, and one of them was to introduce or emphasize the use of angle of attack to the general aviation population. This kind of struck me as a surprise. The last several years I spent in the Marine Corps teaching T-34s. We had a pretty extensive angle of attack package that we teach the new pilots. And just like everyone else, we start them off by flying the numbers, and then once they're comfortable with that, we have them focus solely on angle of attack approaches. And then after that, they incorporate both, and the progression is amazing, from flying the numbers to flying angle of attack to incorporating angle of attack as part of their normal scan. Really, really amazing how quickly their landings improved. So Aspen's angle of attack indicator was developed in concert with the Italian Space Agency to use Aspen's own AHRS information, all the data that's coming inside the Aspen system, to develop an angle of attack solution. We do this without the use of an external probe, which is phenomenal because it really saves on your installation costs. To calibrate is a really simple calibration process. When you want angle of attack, you go to your shop. They stick a card right here in this slot. They unlock angle of attack. They put the basic empty weight of your aircraft in there. They put their max gross weight of the aircraft. Really important, the weight that you're going to go calibrate. So if you're going to go calibrate, figure how much fuel you got, how much weight, and make sure you're accurate as possible in that. All the speeds are going to transfer over because they should already be programmed in. Then you go out and fly. You fly 1.5 minutes at VA, 1.5 minutes at VA times 1. 1.5 minutes at VS times 1.3, then 1.5 minutes at VSO times 1.3. From there, the Aspen system learns your curve, learns your lift curve, and it doesn't matter what your gross weight is, what your center of gravity is. We're going to give you a very accurate depiction of angle of attack on all different flight parameters. Here's what angle of attack looks like on the PFD, and this is what it looks like. This is one view on the MFD. I don't have a picture of it. My favorite way of using it is, if you're familiar with the MFD thumbnail, I typically put the angle of attack in a small thumbnail right here. Just makes the scan really easy. This upper indication right here, that is your clean configuration. This lower one is your full flaps and landing configuration. If you have intermediate flaps, you'd interpolate somewhere in here. The blue bar, plenty of lift. The green bar, you're encroaching on toward your landing AOA. This green to yellow transition right here, that's the sweet spot. That represents 30% above stall. Once you get into the yellow, up to the black crosshair mark, that's about 10% above stall. And the aircraft, your stall warning horn, well, the aircraft should stall right somewhere here before you get to the end. Once you calibrate it, you don't have to stall. If you're uncomfortable stalling the aircraft, you do not have to stall the aircraft to check the calibration. All we want you to do once you're done calibrating is fly to the horn to make sure the appropriate indications are accurate. But always better to fly with CFI to make sure they're dead on. We have a big following in the backcountry pilots as well, and those guys like to go. They go into much shorter runways out there in the bush, and they typically fly right here at the 10% above stall margin and come into land. So really important, if you haven't used angle of attack before, find a CFI that is very familiar with it and go practice it. Once again, angle of attack is not something you stare at. You're still flying your basic numbers. You're looking out here, your normal VFR scan, and just in your periphery, every once in a while, you're coming down and see where the needle is. It's not something you focus on the land. Still, you keep your normal VFR scan out here. Really, really helpful. Next cool feature I want to talk about, this is dual 888 HARS in degraded mode. This was part of the new hardware we got for the Max, so this is only available on the Max systems. If you're a legacy customer, you're probably, you should be very familiar. Legacy displays, Aspen displays, always had to have a backup attitude indicator because of the fact that the pitot static system, pitot in particular, was a single point of failure. So if you lost pitot stat, say you're flying and you get icing conditions, your pitot tube is iced up, you're having a bad day, you forgot to pre-flight your pitot, or the pitot is not working now, and you can't clear that system, our legacy systems would red X. Once again, it's a dual failure. You have to have a bad day, ice, and your PWE is not working. But it is possible. So Aspen recognized that, and we're trying to figure out a way to correct this. So what we do now, what the Aspen system does now is once it recognizes that you have a pitot blockage, it automatically switches to what's called degraded mode. So there's no more single point of failure. In degraded mode, what the Aspen system does, it uses GPS ground speed in lieu of indicated airspeed to maintain the harsh solution. It's really important. As long as if you're IMC, as long as you're doing normal IFR maneuvers, standard rate turns, normal climbs and descents, you are not going to see a difference in performance at ARs. However, we do recommend in the AFMS that if you're in IMC in the degraded mode, that you use half standard rate turns and shallow climbs and descents. And very important that you tell ATC you're in this mode and you require half standard rate turns, shallow descents. This will allow them to lead you more on turns and give you climbs or descents sooner. So make sure if you're in this mode IMC, you're telling ATC you're in this situation. Another note, attitude degraded, this particular enunciation is not a failure of the Aspen system. This is telling you something's wrong with your pitot static system or your pitot system. The reason this is important, say you're flying along VMC, you take off from your home airport, everything's working good. You climb up to altitude, say you're up 13, 14,000 in the winter, and all of a sudden you get attitude degraded in your VMC. Well, what happened? Okay, system's still working, you fly along, you come down, you start to come down to land, and as you get lower and lower, all of a sudden the attitude degraded goes away. Well, this is a sure sign that you have water somewhere in that pitot line. And what's happening is the line is freezing, it's blocking off indicated airspeed. When it's cold, once it warms, it goes back to liquid, and the flow is going through there. So that's one reason you could get it. Also, if you're flying along VMC and this is intermittent, you may have a kink in your line, a hole in your pitot stack line, or a bad connection. But once again, if you get this any time that's not due to icing or a bug, for instance, there's something going on with your pitot system. So have your shop check out your pitot system. Very, very important that you do that. Next cool features introduced with the ProMax system are audio callouts. This is like flying with a really good co-pilot. So now Aspen's your co-pilot. So when you bug an altitude, like for instance, over here, I have 7,000 feet bugged. When I'm climbing to or descending to 7,000 feet, depending on my rate of climb or descent, a few hundred feet prior, I'm hear the word altitude in my headset. That's my cue to look here at my altimeter, see where I'm at to make sure I can ready to level off. Once I'm at 7,000 feet, I'm going to hear the word altitude again. That's once again your cue. Look back here at the altimeter, make sure you're where you want to be, get the aircraft turned up and cruise along at 7,000 feet. And now, if I deviate more than 200 feet from 7,000 feet, I'm going to hear the word altitude again. This is to prevent you. This is your good co-pilot preventing you from getting a violation. So you hear that altitude, you're supposed to be straight and level. You know you've deviated from your altitude. Also, not to pick it here, if you're shooting an instrument approach, well, you've got your minimums bugged, so you bug your minimums here. As you're coming down on the ILS or on any approach for that matter, once again, depending on your rate of descent, roughly 100 to 200 feet prior, you're going to hear the words approaching minimums in your headset. And then once you hit decision altitude, you're going to hear minimums. So once again, Aspen is being your co-pilot. So really, really nice feature to keep you out of trouble. Also, as I mentioned earlier with synthetic vision, so synthetic vision, as the flight path markers changing amber, and you're getting this message here, you're also going to hear these words in your headset. You're going to hear caution, terrain, caution, obstacle, warning, terrain, warning, obstacle. So once again, Aspen has made a really good co-pilot for you, keeping you out of trouble. Also, if you have an MFD with a timer set, once that timer expires, you're going to hear the word timer in your headset. That's your cue. Look at your MFD, scroll to your timer page, see which one expired, whether it's the fuel or legs. Do that particular duty, and then reset the timer, and off you go again. So audio calls are huge. Like I said, really, really good. Flying with a really good co-pilot, like in a cruise served aircraft. One of my favorite cool features introduced with the Max Offfield Intercept Arc. This shows you where along your route of flight. This little banana here, this little cyan arc, shows you where along the flight you're going to intercept the altitude you have set on the PFD. Really, really handy. So think of it, you're flying along, ATC tells you to cross a certain fix at 9,000 feet. Okay, cool. So you bug 9,000 feet. The fix is on your display here. As long as that arc is before that fix, you know you're going to make that crossing restriction. If the arc is beyond the fix, you know you've got to increase your rate of climb or descent to make that restriction. Or if you're already max climb or max descent, you got to tell ATC, hey, I'm maxed out now. I'm not going to make that crossing restriction. Tell them well before so you don't get a violation, or worst case, hit something and get alternate instructions. So really, really important way to use this tool. My favorite way to use this, I used to fly to Centennial quite a bit. And typically the weather's good, so I would just fly VFR with VFR flight following. But I think maybe all the times I flew Centennial, I may have got permission to enter the Class B once or twice the most. Typically, they tell you to make clear the Class B. So this is what I've done. I've looked at Centennial, I figure out how far away that Class B shelf is, and I make it a long track waypoint on my navigator. Now I look here and see the bottom of that shelf is 9,000 feet. Okay, so I'm going to bug 8,000, or I'm going to set 8,700 feet and start my descent. And I'm looking right here, I'm going to be 300 feet below the shelf when I get there. So really great way to use this, to use the altitude intercept. Another way I use it is if I'm going to an unfamiliar airport, I'll set the pattern altitude, maybe 500 feet to 1,000 feet above the pattern altitude, and set it, either 3 to 5 miles away from the airport. If I know I have to fly over the airport to enter the pattern on the other side, I'll go 1,000 feet, fly over and descend. If I know I'm in the pattern on the side I'm coming from, I'll set 500 feet above, about 5 miles out. Both ways give me some altitude, an easy altitude to make sure I can comfortably look down at the pattern and then comfortably make the pattern altitude from there. So a couple of really good ways to use altitude intercept arc. Okay, on to a few tips. We get this question quite a bit. It's about the battery. When do you have to test it? How do you test it? What do you have to do? Well, the Aspen system, Aspen display is constantly monitoring your aircraft electrical system. It's looking for anomalies. And if it comes out of a set parameter, it's going to automatically switch to the battery for you. However, though, batteries should be checked. I've got here, it says batteries should be checked before IFR flight. Really, batteries should be checked before every flight to make sure there's 80% charge. I get it. We're pilots. We get in a hurry. It's just going to be VFR flight. No big deal. Should be checked before every flight, but at a minimum, just asking you, make sure you check before. If you're going IFR, please check and make sure this guy's in this 80% charge. You do that by pressing the menu button right here on the display. You scroll to the second to last page, and the PFD is 14 and 15. When you scroll on this page, external power is going to be in green. All you have to do is press this button here by the battery. The battery will go from white to green, and you'll get a countdown timer, typically 10 to 15 seconds. And this is going to tell you what your battery percent remaining is. And so you're looking for 80%. The battery, as long as it's 80%, it's going to last at least 30 minutes in extreme hot or cold temperatures. Not talking temperatures too hot or too cold for you to be in that cockpit. We put these things in environmental chambers. It's very uncomfortable to be in there. In fact, we don't put people in there. We raise the temperatures to really, really extreme heat and extreme cold to make sure the battery lasts for at least 30 minutes. In what we call short sleeve flying, so you're flying in short sleeve shirt or light jacket, the batteries are typically going to last 45 to 75 minutes, depending on the health of the battery and what percentage it was. Also, when you go to the internal battery, the auto brightness, which up to 212 was actually 70, which the 212 is going to be 50. It dims it down to 40. This extends the life of the battery. And really, if you're in a situation where you need this battery, you should press this left knob here. That switches auto to manual, and dial the left knob down, and you dial the brightness down to a level you can, as low as you can comfortably see. You don't want to strain your eyes, but if you can dial this down lower to say 20, that's going to extend the life of the battery, because the light, the display brightness is what's eating up the battery life. So if you can just dial that down to where you comfortably see it, it really helps extend the battery life. Another thought, if you're a multifunction, say you've got a 2000 system and you've lost all electrical power, so you've lost the GPS systems as well. So all you have are your two Aspen displays. I recommend you do on the MFD, do not turn the MFD off, because that's, we talked earlier about the emergency GPS RSM and all the waypoints being safe. If you turn that MFD off, you're going to lose all that MFD. What you can do is go to manual on the MFD, dial that all the way down to a lower number. You can barely see it. So as long as it's operating, fly off the PFD only until that gets to about 10% and dial up the brightness in the MFD. On your next flight, and you're flying with an instructor, especially if it's a longer flight, you're doing a nice long training flight. Once you get at altitude, I challenge you, go ahead and turn, go to this page, turn the battery, see how all this stuff works, and fly around the battery for a while. Key point though, you want to make sure you have at least an hour and a half of flight left before you turn the battery back on, so you can charge that battery back up for the next flight. But try this out in a controlled environment with an instructor to make sure you understand how this works. Next tip or features deals with the 360 view versus Arc HSI and Arc CDI. So many people don't know the PFD, Aspen PFD comes with 3 different compass modes. The default, whenever the system turns on, it always goes to the 360 HSI. That seems to be the most popular, primarily because all of us that learn on 6-packs, that's the 360 view is what we're comfortable with. By challenging, this arc mode is really, really nice, because what it does, it blows up that compass rose to 100-degree arc up here. So this makes heading control, fine-tuned heading control, much, much nicer. And with the arc mode, you have both the HSI mode, which is this guy here, standard HSI, or the CDI mode. So when I use these two differently. If I'm at altitude, I'm cruising along and I want to use the arc mode. The arc HSI works pretty well for me. I'm comfortable with it. However, especially out here in the Western US, when I'm getting lower and lower and I'm starting to deal with terrain, I might want to use the CDI mode, because what that does, that declutters, that removes all this stuff here and declutters that center display. So now I can see the terrain, any obstacles that are popping up there a lot clearer. So try these different modes and see, once again, if you're a flying instructor, try these different modes and see how you like them. I will tell you, on your next, when you're doing your next IPC and you're told to hand fly an ILS, go into this Arc HSI mode. This makes your, like I mentioned earlier, makes your heading control a lot finer. And what I do is once I have the wind correction figured out, I'll just sync the heading bug. And so the heading bug will be right here. And I'm just making my corrections within the heading bug. It makes you look like a pro. So try that out. It's a really, really handy feature. And of note, between the 3 synthetic vision views, well, there's actually 6 because you have SV1, 2, and 3, then you have SV narrow, SV1 narrow, SV2 narrow, SV3 narrow. The non-synthetic view and all these compass rooms, there are 21 different PFD views to choose from on the Aspen. And I bet you to guess 90% of owners only use the 360 HSI. So challenge yourself on different flights, with an instructor, or if you're VFR just cruising along. Try out these different views and see which one makes sense to you when you use it. And I think you'll find you'll start finding the Arc a lot more. Okay, I alluded to this earlier. Bearing pointers are still useful. We make the joke about being children of a gentle line. But bearing pointers are still very, very important, especially for maintaining your SA where you're being vectored. Controllers are human too. I bust on the controllers in SoCal a lot because they seem, when I saw the flying helicopters there, we were the stepchildren of Southern California, and they tend to forget about us. So, like I said, we had FLIR, but we were also using our bearing needles to make sure we knew where we were at all times. So on these pictures here, so we're getting vector around for an ILS. So now here I have the #1 single bearing needle going to GPS, which is pointing at FAC now. So FAC is right here, so that makes perfect sense. That #2 needle is pointing off my right wing. Perfect. Then I've got the #2 bearing needle, the double needle, pointing back here at the VOR. So now imagine you don't have, you're just a single display, you don't have the benefit of an MFD over here. This is really important to make sure you know where you're at all times. Never rely solely on ATC to keep you on trouble. It's your responsibility too, even though you're IFR, it's your life in your hands. So make sure you keep SA and use these bearing needles. Another good tip I want to offer, and this was brought several years ago. My flying mentor, I was back home getting an IPC with him, and he saw that I was, how I was using all my GPS and everything else on the ground track marker on my ILS approach. And the next one around, he goes, "Well, James, I want you to turn off the GPS. I want you to deselect that approach. And instead of loading the approach on the GPS, I just want you to dial in the ILS and see if you can fly it without the benefit of all these other features." So I hadn't done that in a while. So it was really challenging. I had to bring out the bearing needles and figure out where I'm at along the route, along the path. So I challenge you in your next IPC, ask your instructor, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to fly the ILS, basically call it raw data without the use of the GPS, and see if you can still do all these things are required." Because GPS, there are GPS outages happening. You're still going to have to land the aircraft. So once again, your instructor, give that a shot. Okay, the #1 thing we get hit up on the show is how to use GPS steering. A lot of words here, and I'm sorry I'm going to kind of read through this and get this ironed out for you. This is a typical approach. We'll say that if you have a King, an older analog autopilot like a King, Century, or Cessna autopilot that's using GPS steering that's built in the Aspen, this is how you would do this approach. So imagine you're over here somewhere and you're cleared direct Dudley for the ILS 22 approach. So you go in your GPS unit, whether you want to get Avionics, Garmin, we don't care. You load the GPS, you load the ILS approach, and you select CDI source on the GPS to GPS. Now you're going to set your heading bug in the general direction of Dudley, engage heading, loading your autopilot, and you're cruising along. Then you press the GPS hotkey on the Aspen. And from there, nice, really nice. It's going to fly directly to Dudley. So they come out here, do the procedure turn, line you up on final without you touching the thing. Really, really nice feature. GPSS is a really powerful tool. At that point on your autopilot, you press the approach mode, and then you change the CDI source. This is very important. You change the CDI source on your GPS system to VLOC. Now that's going to automatically change the CDI source on the HSI source to VLOC as well. At that point, intercept glide slope and fly down to decision altitude. Once again, really nice. Now, say you're down here and you don't have the runway in sight. You have to execute this approach. So you clean up the aircraft, initiate your climb. In this case, the autopilot's been disengaged. You climb up to 6,500 feet. You start your right turn to 7,700. And now you go over. You activate the missed approach on the GPS system. You change the CDI source to GPS. Very important. Then re-engage the autopilot in heading mode, and it's going to fly you right back to Dudley and enter the hold and do exactly what that GPS tells it to do. So really important, understand this. And if you're new to GPS steering, make sure you talk with your CFII and go over this on the ground, because buttonology is what really hurts people. Go over the buttonology of the system, make sure you understand when to press what. Practice this on the ground as much as possible, make sure you understand it. Go with your instructor, go try it out. If you've got a new autopilot like the DFC 90, oh geez, the DFC 90 was nice, because if I was out here, I would just be in nav mode. It's going to fly me direct to Dudley. It's going to execute the procedure turn. The DFC 90 is going to automatically switch from nav mode to approach mode. And of course, you have the GPS unit on ILS auto. So once it lines up in final, it's going to switch the CDI source for you to ILS and do everything perfect for you. So really, really nice. This example is basically on an older analog autopilot with the DFC 90s. And I think I have not had the opportunity to fly the 3100 or the GFC 600, but I think they operate the same as that DFC 90. But really, really powerful tool. But make sure you understand how to use this. Fly this with an instructor in BMC conditions first. Then once you've mastered it, then you're good to go for IFR. Okay, so most of you probably know, or if you haven't known, I'll tell you now. We released software 212 earlier this year. The big feature of 212, of course, was the GFC 600 interface. We've been working with Garmin for several years now on this interface. And for those of you that don't understand the certification process, basically, Aspen, we provide all our information, all our outputs to our competitors to say, hey, this is how our stuff works. So if you want to integrate, this is how you do it. And working back with Garmin, it was similar with the 3100 with STEC. They would look at our stuff, say, hey, can you change this to make this work better on our end? So we would make changes to our software. They would go fly it again, make some more changes, a lot of back and forth to make this work. And then we would flight test our system and make sure all our software is still good. But the autopilot manufacturer, in this case, Garmin or Genesis, they actually do the certification between the Aspen and their autopilot. But really great. 212 was released. GFC 600 is out there. So now we have both the GFC 600 and the STEC 3100, the newest digital autopilots out there are compatible with the Aspens. One of the cool features we added was extended runway center lines. This is really nice because you can do 3, 5, and 10 nautical miles. How you use these, let's say you're here and you're told to enter a left down for 17. Oh, you see you're already in the left down, perfect. Or you're told to enter a left base for 22. You kind of see the extended center line. So this just helps you orient yourself better to enter patterns. Really, really handy. I think I alluded to this one earlier with the Max systems. The Max being a much brighter, more dynamic display. When you turn them on now, the auto is now 50 by 70. We've also expanded the fault log. The Maxes have had a fault log process since we released the Max. We've added some more features to that. So think of your car. You're driving along your car and you get a check engine light, and all of a sudden the check engine light goes away. So what happened here? You go to your shop plugs in, look at the program, they spit out a bunch of codes. It's, oh, you've got a bad sensor here, a bad sensor there. So it reduces troubleshooting time. So that's exactly what we do now. So if you have some type of anomaly and it goes away, well, you want to know what the anomaly was. So you fly back to your shop, not right away, but when you get to your shop, And they're going to put a card right here in the slot here, and it's going to download the fault logs of the last several flights. They're going to take that information, send it to our field service team. They're going to analyze it and tell them what's wrong. So it's really cuts down. The big thing is, instead of them just swapping out a display, it really helps cut down the troubleshooting and make the troubleshooting much more precise. If you have a Max system in EA100, there are some improvements there as released. DFC 90, 211, the Max is released 210 and 210.2 worked really well with the DFC 90. We did have a bug with 211 and DFC 90. It still worked, but it gave you a AHRS miscompare message all the time. 212 cleared that up. So DFC. So if you have a DFC 90, you're holding off. The 212 has that corrected. Also, as I mentioned earlier, it adds ARIC inputs or outputs for selected altitude for indicator and indicator speed for both the true and Linux and autopilots. If you have an older D5, like the original release, I think there's a new part number, so you may have to, if you want one of these autopilots, you may have to send a D5 back, but just work with your dealer and your sales manager, and they'll get it figured out for you. Okay, before I talk about probables, I do want to talk about this real quick, because I mentioned this earlier. This is courtesy of Bruno, a Fly with Bruno. Great guy, by the way. If you don't follow him, he's a really good guy to follow. But this is his 2000 Max system, and notice there's nothing else here on the panel. His entire six-pack has been removed, and this is a complete legal installation now. So really, really powerful way to clean up your panel. So our current promos right now that we're running, first one is buy one, get one half price. So say you're a legacy, you have a legacy PFD and you want to upgrade to a Pro Max 2000 system. You basically pay full price for the Max upgrade on the PFD, and we sell you the MFD 1000 half price. If you don't have any Aspens, well, you pay full price for the Pro Max PFD, and we sell you the MFD 1000 half price. So really, really great deals going on now. And as I mentioned earlier, we are on the 5-year anniversary of the release of the E5. So what we've done now is we rolled back pricing to 2018, which I believe is about $1,000 and $900,000 cheaper. So it's back to 2018 pricing, and that's for a limited time as well. So really, really good promos we have going on. And really, if you want it, we also have legacy systems. If you don't want to spend the money for the Max systems, we do have factory reman legacy systems that we're selling. We do not sell reman Max systems, so all Maxes are brand new, and we only sell legacy reman systems. So, but they're great options for you. Just let your regional sales manager know. Speaking of regional sales managers, like I said, Dave Wilcox, he's handling chats for us tonight. He's in charge of the Western US and Western Canada. There's his contact information up here. If you're in the Northeast, Midwest, or Eastern Canada, that's Mike Studley. There's his contact information right there. If you're in the Southeast all the way over to Texas, that's Mr. Andy Smith with his contact information there. And if you're anywhere else in the world, that's Mr. Corey Relling, and there's his contact information. With that, we're done. I'm going to keep up this slide so you have time to write down this information here. And I'll ask Dave to unmute himself, and we'll go over any questions that we didn't get to or anything that's prevalent. And then I guess before Dave pops up, this question that popped up yesterday is the GFC 500. So as of right now, the GFC 500 is not compatible with the Aspen displays. If you're an Aspen customer and you want that GFC 500, we encourage you to reach out to Garmin directly and ask them if they can do this. So the new rules for autopilots is the autopilot manufacturer has to do the certification. So even if Aspen wanted to, we cannot make that happen without Garmin's exclusive approval. And like I said, we've been working really hard with the GFC 600, so maybe they'll allow that sometime soon, but that is out of our purview. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dave.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, yeah, James, we had a question from Steve here that I didn't quite have the answer to. So in the degraded mode, he wanted to know which GPS was used, and I responded to it, letting him know either if you have dual GPSs, because we're monitoring both at the same time. I don't know if it matters which CDI or which GPS 1, GPS 2 you're selected on the Aspen, if there matters that way or not. So obviously they're both receiving and we're both talking to both of them. So
This is an excellent question, and I'm probably, next time I give this presentation, I'm going to add this. So in our system, so if your GPS one, it really doesn't matter which GPS is selected here. If you're GPS one, we will take information from GPS one or GPS two automatically without any pilot input. But say you're having a really, really bad day and you've lost GPS one and GPS two. Well, the GPS and an emergency RSM GPS, now that one's going to provide ground speed and maintain attitude degraded. So it's going to be, you'd have to have a really bad day to get down there. You'd have to lose 2 GPSs and an RSM for this not to work. Yeah, great question. So it's going to use whatever, it'll use GPS one, GPS two, or the emergency RSM without any pilot input. There's nothing you got to select. It's just going to pick whatever's available. Primarily it's going to go towards the panel mounts first, one or two, and if they can't get it from them, it's going to get it from the RSM. Excellent question.
And Dave Milligan, this one I could not answer. So in degraded mode, what happens if you get a RAM or GPS lost? Does the whole attitude indicator X out, or do we use the RSM GPS and still give AI indications?
Just like the last question, that emergency RSM GPS is the fail safe. So as long as that GPS, as long as the RSM is still working, you're going to get it. Now, yeah, you'd have to be a really bad day if you're in degraded mode and you're in some GPS outage area. But you'd have to be having a really bad day. So think about that. You'd have to have your pitot heat would have to fail because you can't clear it. You'd have to, be in an outage area. It's funny. I remember back in my military, learning to fly the 53 Echo, they would just compound you with multiple types of failures, the stuff that you probably never really see. But yeah, I don't think that scenario is very likely. Because you've got the 3 GPS systems, you've got pitot heat, you've got multiple ways to clear this. And that's a big key thing here. When you see attitude degraded in your IMC, that's your cue to turn on your pitot heat. So you'd have to be in a really multiple failure type of condition to get to that point. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if everybody's monitoring the Q&A, but Steve also had a very good point about using the banana and the emergency off-field landings, setting it to ground level. So you can determine the AGL indication on the MFD.
Exactly.
Way you'll know when you're within the glide range.
Yeah, there are some really great ways to use that altitude intercept arc, and I really like it. It's a great feature.
Yeah, James, if you could you touch on, because Robert had a good question as well about when on approach and using GPSS.
Mm-hmm.
The GPS's hotkey indicator turns from green to yellow when he switches CDI to VLOC on his 530. Can you touch on that a little bit of how to, when you're on an approach, just
so
GPS versus.
That's the beauty of it. So in this example I talked about, once you turn GPSS on, you don't have to turn it back off, because GPSS on the Aspen only works when the autopilot's in heading mode. So as soon as you go to approach mode, it is now the Aspen is no longer sending GPS steering information. It's only sending approach mode information. So that's why you don't have to, so when you go to approach mode, you don't have to turn GPS off.
All right. Well, Robert, disregard my response then.
So, and that's the beauty of it. So you're in approach mode. GPSS is in amber because it's no longer getting, because you're in VLOC and it's no longer getting a GPS signal. But then once you get here and you activate that missed approach, you change the CDI source back to GPS, re-engage that heading mode, that GPSS is going to go green again, and boom, it's going to fly you right to Dudley. Excellent question. And that's probably something else I should throw in here about how that GPS button works.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions about the 212 update. Yeah, all of our updates for software map versions are free. We don't charge for that. Dealers have access to that via the dealer ramp. They may charge you about an hour's worth of labor because it is, they have to go and download it and go out to the aircraft, and it's about a 12 to 15 minute update, and then they have to do the required logbook entry as well. So Just plan on paying about an hour's worth of shop labor for the 212 update or any update as far as software is concerned on the Aspens. Yeah, that's
Yeah, thank you, David, Dave Wilcox. I just saw, something here from Mark. I probably need to get with Mark. I don't even want to try to pronounce his last name, but he has a 2000 Pro Max with no synthetic vision. So we need to figure out, Mark, what you need to get that done. If you want to email David Wilcox or myself, david.wilcox@aspenavionics.com or
Harry,
Peter Papa.
Harry, what's the question? I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, he has a 2000 Pro Max with no synthetic vision. He should be having that.
Okay, so that's really dependent. So when the Maxes were first introduced, synthetic vision was not included. So we introduced
Okay.
the Max. The first 2 years of the Max, they were at a greatly reduced price and did not include synthetic vision.
Gotcha.
So it depends. You go get with your shop that did the install, see when the date was, and then they'll contact your regional sales manager. But it's not the Max. When the Max was introduced, I can't remember, Dave. I think it was like the first 2.5 years of it. Synthetic vision wasn't made standard till after that, and of course that was a price increase as well.
right. One of the other questions that maybe you can touch, I don't know if this is something we're looking at 2.13 or beyond, is any type of audio for angle of attack.
So the FAA is pretty strict on angle of attack with general aviation aircraft. Remember, you've got a stall warning horn, and the FAA was pretty explicit when we developed angle of attack that they didn't want any other thing. You know, the visual is okay, but they didn't want any other audio other than the stall warning horn. Right now there is no intent, unless the FAA changes that rule to allow that. But right now there's no intent to add audio to the GA type of angle of attack indicators. And while we're on angle of attack, something else I didn't touch on. As I mentioned, we don't have an external probe, or other GA units do. And notice, you know, they're derived from pressure differential, and they can only calibrate in one configuration. So, and typically they can calibrate the most conservative, which is flaps up, clean configuration. So when you're landing and you got the gear and flaps down, those are giving you an ultra conservative indication of angle of attack. So the point being, the way we do with dual indications without the probe is much better than the pressure sensor type, the pressure differential type AOA indicators out there.
Yeah, even in a slip skid and situation, it's way more accurate.
Yep. The only time, of course, with any angle of attack, and again, this is important to know too, it doesn't matter if it's ours or anyone else's, those are all predicated on a clean wing. So if you have any ice or frost on your wing, do not rely on that angle attack indicator, and it doesn't matter who made it. They're calibrated on clean wings and not calibrated on frost buildup or anything like that.
Yeah, and William was asking about the 212 update. He's using Avionics and a King autopilot, so essentially no requirement to or even need to update to 212 unless you're using a digital autopilot. So yeah, the old analog Kings. STEX, not any benefit to upgrade to the 212 at this point.
Well, of course, you get this cool, if you have an MFD as well, you get these cool extended center lines, but if you don't have
that is a good point, yes.
Cool. Do we hit them all? Everyone's questions are
touch base with everything. Yeah, the other ones were pretty simple, and I answered them on the fly.
Yeah, I just saw a few on the EA 100. From Eric, I just saw a few more coming in. I know that we are at the top of the hour. We've been on for a little over an hour now, but if there's a way that we can address these and then we can say good evening to everybody, that would be great.
Well, hang on. Yeah, I just noticed while I was going back over the answered ones, there was about 18 more open ones that are.
Yeah, they're coming in fast and furious, Dave.
Yeah, so in the degraded mode, does GPS need to be WAS?
No, it just needs to be IFR. So like a non-WAS 430 or 530 is still going to work. It just has to be an IFR certified GPS, and that does not mean it has to be WAS.
And Mark here was stating that he's getting all of his enunciation except for minimums call out. Now, I'm assuming, Mark, you're talking about audio, since you use the term call out, but you also said enunciation. So if you don't have minimums turned on and set, then you will not receive that.
Yeah, if you're setting it, I don't think I've ever heard, because it's all those call outs are going to be the same volume. You can't, each one is the same, is one volume, and you set that. So if you're hearing the others, as long as you're setting that, you should be hearing those. That should be an easy check, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, David, you can do that in the hangar and just set minimums. Put your
Yes,
head
use
down
the barrel, yeah, and you can set your barrel.
Use your barrel and dial down and see if you're hearing it.
Yeah, yeah. The install manual has that checkout in it as well. So
yeah, check that out first, and if you're still not getting it, contact your dealer. But that's odd, because there's no, it's not on a separate circuit or anything like that. Those call offs are all in one location as far as pulling from the software. But we will get it figured out one way or another.
let's see. Robert, he says it with his pitot heat on, he gets a big red X on the EFD due to icing once. They should have been more aware of the failure modes.
I'm not quite sure how that would work unless your pitot heat wasn't keeping up with the ice.
Yeah.
Because once pitot heat's on, it clears it. That would go away. So if it's not going away, once again, you're in that scenario where either your pitot heat's not working properly, or there's some type of water buildup in that pitot.
Well, if the ice built up inside, turn pitot heat on, now you got water in your system too.
Well, the pitot tubes have that drain on the back, so
they do, but
so in theory, that's supposed to clear that out, but it may or may not. So, but if you go to a Max system, you won't have that problem.
Let's see. Yeah, Stuart, with your red X and pitot heat warning a few minutes after while taxiing. Yeah, so the only thing that can flag that warning is if you have a 30 knot difference between indicated airspeed and GPS ground speed. So you may want to have somebody make sure that the pitot static quick disconnects on the back of that display are actually clicked on, and that you're not turning your GPS off while you're taxiing. Because if it's configured for a GPS, it's looking to compare airspeed to ground speed. So that should be easily troubleshot.
Yeah, that's something any good Aspen dealer could be able to figure out for you.
Steve, no, there is not a way to disable the pitot input from the menu to test a degraded mode.
Yeah, unfortunately. So in our test aircraft, we have a series of switches that we can disable a lot of stuff in that plane. The inputs to the Aspen, and pitot heat's one of them, or pitot's one of them. So we test this by disabling the pitot, by blocking the pitot system. But there's no way to practice this. There's no way to practice this particular one in a normal aircraft.
Yeah, are you guys, James, this is more for you. Any chance you have an update to the voice used for altitude callouts? Something a little softer would be nice.
Well, it's funny, when we were doing audio, there was an intern engineering guy who drew the short straw that happened. So that's his voice. All you can really do is go back to the shop. They can turn the volume down if it's too abrupt for you. They can turn the volume down, but there's no other voice for it right now.
Yeah,
but that's something we can take to the higher ups and see if they can change the voice.
Yeah. So Paul was wanting to know if we could get a little more detail on the DFC 90 improvements. Essentially, that was just a boot up procedure where if you booted up the DFC 90 prior to the EFD being completely booted up, you would get a
Yeah, you get that AHRS miscompare.
miscompare.
It
Yeah,
would still work, but it's a big annoying enunciation up there.
yeah.
So
You'd have to
also-
pull the breaker for the DFC 90 and then reset it, and then everything would work great. But the 2.12 fixes all of that. So
yeah, 2.12 fixes that synchronizing timing of which one boots up first, so you won't get that anymore.
yeah, and also Eric Crawford, yeah, the 2.12 is not going to do anything for your EA 100 as far as any feature upgrades, because again, the 2.12 only addresses the GFC 600 integration and the extended, center lines for on the MFD.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the specific EA 100 improvement was. And like I said, it's not something you would see as a pilot. I think it's working a little better with the new hardware and software, but there's no new feature that'd be visible that a pilot would notice, basically. Because a lot of times we correct features that pilots don't even notice. We just catch it, and we catch it in the lab. It's like, oh, that shouldn't be doing that, but it's not a problem to the pilot, but it's something could potentially, if we don't correct it now, we'll just pile up on us later for software correction. So we just take care of it early. So that's all it really was.
Well, maybe you have any insight into Steve's question about the AOA sensor being used to determine best glide speed. I don't see how, I don't think you could, but
I don't think it would be good for best glide.
yeah, I can't.
I would have to research that and figure it out a little bit. So I mean, but remember, you got on the Aspen when your dealer programs in the display, there's a best glider bug on your Aspen. If you turn on your read ref speeds, and I would just fly that, and then reference angle attack can make sure you're installing the aircraft as well. But fly this, on best glide, you're best to fly the speed.
Yeah, Mark, I'm not sure what your question is on you have a 2000 Pro Max on the pilot side and an E5 on the co-pilot side, and you're getting a cross-check error. The E5 and the 2000 Max should not be communicating with each other. Those would need to be separated, independent. So I'm not sure if you're stating that those two aren't communicating with each other, or if you're getting a cross-check attitude message on one system or the other. Again, use that david.wilcox@aspenavionics.com, and we can talk about that further. I would need more information on that to help you troubleshoot that.
And that's I can't remember if I've given this presentation a couple times already. I can't remember if I mentioned it. The E5 is a standalone. The E5 cannot be interconnected to any MFD or another PFD or anything on the Aspen.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that he has them interfaced together, or if the dealer may have tried to do the RS-232 between that 2000 system and the E5, which should not have been done. I don't know, but again, just email me and we can discuss that further.
If you have pictures, if you see, it's really important when you see something weird that you don't understand what's going on, snapping a picture and sending it to us, that helps us out so much more than trying to describe. Okay, we're trying to make sure we understand what you're saying, but a picture really just, boom. Okay, we see this, we can figure this out.
Exactly. And then when did we release 2.12?
It was last month, maybe about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was earlier, like February, I think. But yeah, it was earlier this year.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I would call this a pretty darn good webinar. We are a little 13 minutes over our allotted time, and having said that, I want to really thank everybody for hanging in there with us, and a lot of the questions came in that have been really great, and certainly I can tell you that we will take these to heart and bring these up in meetings and whatnot of what you guys are talking about. So one other thing I wanted to make sure you guys understood is that I will be recording this webinar, and it will be available on the Aspen website on the homepage under Evolution Video Library. So it'll be there no later than tomorrow afternoon Pacific time. So again, thank you for joining us today and appreciate your attendance.
Yep, and by all means, reach out to us via if you go to our website, there's links on there to reach out to us for support, for sales, for whatever you need. And we try to make it a goal to get back to you guys within an hour of receiving those. So, yeah, so anybody we didn't be able to answer tonight, please reach out to us tomorrow or whenever you have time, and we will answer those questions for you directly.
All right, good night, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate you. Thank you.